every solution that we implement has this financial management piece that's really at the heart and provides all of the accounting and handles some of the specific complexities within the E&P sector, such as joint venture accounting and accounting for production sharing contracts, having asset depreciation by unit of production. So some of the things that not all accounting products can actually cope with, and Mark will take you through some of that shortly. We have some extended financial management capabilities around AFE approval processes, time writing, document scanning, and expense management. And with the financial management piece, some of our clients actually build out from being sort of very exploration focused and having small teams to actually going out and doing some drilling and doing some work, workovers and that kind of thing, and are then interested in implementing some of the extended pieces such as supply chain management, where we can implement a very well-tailored procurement solution, very well-tailored for the E&P sector, because it manages a lot of the key processes in oil and gas procurement, and it fully integrates with materials management for all of those key requirements in terms of stores and materials issues and returns. The piece at the end here, which we won't focus on today because probably isn't relevant for too many people, when we have clients who are operators of assets and they're in production, one of the things that's often required is to be able to provide asset management, work order management based around preventative and planned maintenance, and that's what the operational management piece is all about. And the supply chain management and operational management sit within EAM. The financial management piece sits within Sun Systems, and you can implement this solution almost to tailor exactly what you want. You can just implement the financial management piece and then add the supply chain and possibly add the operational. So it's a plug-and-play solution, and you're not having to buy everything up front, and there's no overlapping with having various different solutions that you have to buy from different vendors at different times. So it's a good economic way of actually doing things. We'll go through some of this, so I won't dwell on these slides and steal the thunder from Lee and Mark, but we'll show you some of the purchasing capabilities in the supply chain. We'll also show you some of the core financial management processes and look at some of the oil and gas specific processes like cutback and AFEs. And we won't actually go into any of the operational management today, but if anybody is interested in finding out a little bit more about the asset management or work order management side, or health and safety, corrective and preventative maintenance, then we can follow up with that more specifically. But in terms of the demonstration, I'm now going to hand over to Lee. He's going to spend about the next 10 minutes maybe going through the supply chain side to give you a feel for that. And then the majority of the session and the remainder of the session will be given over to looking at the financial management side. So enough from me, and without further ado, I shall hand over to Lee Sands.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Lee Sands, as Steve has introduced me, and I work predominantly with the EAM software. And what I'm planning to show you during this session is to go through the procurement element of EAM. And as Steve mentioned, the software also has the capability to move more in the operational side with materials management, preventative maintenance, reactive maintenance, as required. But just for this session, I'm going to take you through the more procurement elements of the system. So hopefully you can see my screen, and you should be able to see what we have is our initial login screen. So I'm currently logged in as a procurement user, and as you expect, the look and feel of the system would differ depending on the person or the role they have. And this is what we call our start center, and this is again completely tailored to each user or to the role in which they have. And on the left hand side we have what we call inboxes, and these give us quick shortcuts to transactions or items that require our attention, and a double clicking of these will take me to a filtered list where I can deal with perhaps anything that's awaiting my personal approval or items that require some kind of attention. On the right hand side, we've got the key performance indicators, and again just a very small selection I've produced here, but these can be tailored to match any kind of KPI that you require. A few examples here are things like the requisition to PO approval time, things like spend against any AFE budgets you may have, late deliveries, total of committed spend this month, and things like that. These also allowed an element of drill down, so the spend against AFE, I can see here, there's a little arrow, I can click on that, and it's logged me out. Just wanted to show you the login screen. So back in again, there we go. So back to the Start Center, and if I drill down on that KPI, it should give me the underlying KPIs for each month. So I'm able to drill down. I can double click on those and it will take me to the relevant records. Across the top, we've got our menu items. So as a purchasing user, we're seeing things like budgeting, we're seeing purchasing, so contracts, requests for quotations, revisions, purchase orders, purchase requisitions. We've got the receipting, so we want to do item receipting. We can do non-PO receipts and invoicing. So we cover things like advance payments, which is a big part of the oil and gas industry, energy industry especially, where you're going to be procuring things and needing to pay for them before you receive them. Non-PO, PO invoices and credit notes. We also have a simplistic expenses part of the system as well, should you require that as standard. So that's kind of the look and feel of the system. What I'm planning to do now is just to take you through a very simplistic purchase order, from creating it to receipting it and invoicing it, just to show you the three-way matching capability of the system. And then I thought I'd finish off just by showing you how we can control spend against budgets at the purchase requisition stage. So if I navigate to a purchase order, I click in there. The look and feel of all the screens will be very similar. This is what we call a list view, and it's going to give me a personalized list of all the purchase orders that perhaps I have authorization to see or authorization to approve. And at the top, I can quite simply just create a new purchase order. And in this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a template. So over here I've got a template field, and if I click on that, it brings me up a couple of templates that I have. I've got one here for a new starter as an example. Click on that, and if I save that now, what it does is it pre-populates all of the required fields and brings across all of the relevant purchase order lines. So you can see that I've got 2 PO lines totaling £600, and it's moved the status of this purchase order to awaited approval. So depending on your workflows, depending on your processes, we can move these statuses between, if it needs some kind of financial approval or budget holder approval, or if perhaps the person who is raising the purchase order can approve it straight away, then we can have all of that. Again, with all the financial approval limits that you may have in place. If I just click on the Items tab, just to show you the lines that is added automatically. And there we can see that the template has added 2 lines for me. One's a laptop and one's a phone. So this is just an example of a templated purchase order. What we could do, of course, is to have a purchase order or a requisition initially and add the lines manually that way. But just for speed, I'm going to show you this templated solution. So what I'll do now is I'll just approve it because my user has approval rights. Save that. And that would then give us the purchase order, which we could automatically send to the supplier once approved, or we can print out, attach to an email, or if you so wish, post it to the supplier. I'm not sure anyone does that anymore. And what I need to show you on here now is that within EAM we have a very fast way to do receipting. So at the bottom right I've got a Receive All Lines button. once I click that, it will do the goods receipt for me automatically. If your process was a little bit more detailed and you required something like inspections or some kind of approval process before receipting, then that of course will be possible as well. But just for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to receive all the lines. Just assume that we've received it as soon as we've approved it, essentially. If I now reset the screen, that status should have automatically updated to tell me that this purchase order has been fully received. And there we go. So in this scenario, so far I've raised a purchase order. We've now received the goods, and we would assume that the supplier would then send us an invoice, and we would then need to pay for that invoice or go through an approval process to get it to payment stage. And what we would do in that case is within EAM again, we're able to raise the invoice for payment, and then we'll push it through into the Sun Systems system that's Mark will show after this. So if you look at the bottom here, I've got a little field that says create an invoice. Just by double clicking that, going to quickly and easily raise me an invoice voucher. All I need to do is put in the unique supplier invoice, something very good like ABC, 123 ABC. Of course, there's several more fields that I can use here should I want to, but this is a very simplistic example that I'm giving you. And if I save that, we can see that I've got the lines have come across, and the description has now taken the purchase order description. And there we go. So, and I'm then able to go through some kind of workflow approval for that invoice, just as it was before. So in this case, all I'm going to do is just show you that what the system will do now is it will automatically do a match, should I want to match the lines. Try and save that. If I had, for example, not received the goods, then the invoice would not allow me to approve it. If perhaps the price was higher or lower than the purchase order, depending on the tolerance that we'd set, it would also stop me from doing that as well. So the system automatically has that three-way invoice matching capability. And that's done. So what that does now, once approved, that will then be pushed into the Sun Systems ledgers, and they'll be updated accordingly, and that's ready for payment to the supplier. So that's essentially the P2P solution within EAM in a very simplistic manner. And just one other thing I want to show you while we're in the system is to go to purchase requisitioning. So a purchase could start from requisition, it could start from a purchase order, it could start from a request from quotation, it could start from some kind of contract. We're very flexible in however you want to raise your purchases. And what I want to show you is just at the top here, I've got an already created purchase requisition. And the scenario that I'm painting here is that this month's budget for this particular AFE here is 50,000. We've already committed to 48,000. Therefore, the spend of 2,200 will push us over the budget for that particular AFE budget. So if I then try to approve this transaction, we can see the system stopping us. So it's saying the budget cannot be exceeded because the budget of 50,000 has been exceeded. Should I approve this? And then that would allow us to go through a higher approval workflow if required, or perhaps you would just like to stop those kind of transactions. So just an example there of how the system can be used to stop over budget purchase requisitions. And of course, the way the system's configured, we can also have individual user approval limits and anything really to stop people from creating requisitions or purchase orders where not required. And I'm just going to show you quickly how that budget can look within the system. And then once I'm showing you this, I can hand over to my colleague Mark to show the Sun Systems side of things. So there we go. Here's a quick overview of all the budgets for this particular AFE. And the example I was just giving you was 2013. We're in period 10. The budget is 50,000. There we go. We've already committed to the 48,000. Therefore, the 2,200 I just tried to approve has been stopped. And then, as you expect from any system, we have reporting capabilities as well. So all of these information we pulled out in a spreadsheet and kind of reported to anybody as required. So that's the simplistic view of EAM. What I'm going to do now is hand you over to my colleague Mark Anderson. I'm just going to make him the presenter, and he will take you through the Sun Systems side of the house.
Right, good afternoon everyone. Important for me to talk you through sort of the ledger bits of the product. Going to try and cover off a couple of things just in this fairly quick session. The first is to talk a little bit about the structure of Sun Systems, because in many ways it's the structure of Sun Systems that makes it different, makes it powerful. Also, I'm going to try and illustrate that structure a little bit, and I'll close off with a little bit of a look at some of the reporting tools we have available. So to start off with, I think Lee's already covered most of the navigation points, so it saves me a job covering those. I'm going to start off looking very briefly at the chart of accounts record in Sun Systems, because that really rather enshrines a lot of the differences in Sun Systems. So if I just pull up that record type for a second, and we'll have a look at one of them, and I'll try and explain some of the key features of the account record. Yeah, I'm afraid you'll suffer my typing more than once in this session. So we're starting off, and I'm looking at a particular revenue account in my chart of accounts. And the first thing to be aware of in Sun Systems is the fact that it's a single ledger system. Well, what that means is, rather than what I would call more traditional accounting systems, which have multiple ledgers for things like bought ledger, sales ledger, Sun Systems takes the view that at the end of the day, they're all financial transactions, they're all aspects of the business's sort of day-to-day transaction processing. So we can store them all in one place and then add attributes to them to allow us to report them in different ways. And that's quite powerful, because it gives you a very sort of attribute-based logically cube view of the business, so you can slice and dice everything from one place at the same time. So if we start off looking at a revenue account, you'll see we have a number of account types. P&L and balance sheet, we expect it to be there. Debtor and creditor there as well, and as I say, that's because we're a single ledger, so we store all of this information in one place. We also have the concept of a client account, and that's effectively a hybrid of a debtor and creditor, and it can behave as either at different stages and based on the balance of the account at a particular time. So that can be quite powerful, where you've got like a two-way trading relationship with an organisation, either because there's some sort of agency involved, or for something like an intercompany account, or an account that represents a joint JV partner. We've also got memo accounts. Now, the memo accounts are statistical accounts that sit outside the trial balance, and they're really there for two primary reasons. The first primary reason is for things like KPI reporting. So it might well be that you want to store statistics about the organisation in terms of headcount, floor space, units of production, and attribute those numbers in the same way you attribute the financial numbers, so with information about what cost centre it belongs to or what department it belongs to. So you can include a headcount by cost centre or miles travelled by department figure very easily in your management reports. And the other reason it's used is as part of the cost allocation routines. So often the memo accounts will hold the basis for an allocation. So you might be holding something like partner shares in a particular JV in there, or you might be storing, say, the headcounts in the department, so you're going to take some central overheads and split those out based on headcount or floor space or whatever. So that's quite multi-purpose. So that's the first concept. The second concept that's really powerful about Sun Systems is the idea of analysis. And Sun Systems has analysis on basically most of its key record types. So for today's purpose, we're really talking about the account and the journal transactions themselves, but it also includes suppliers, customers, fixed assets, etc. And the idea of these is basically the custom properties of these concepts that we can use to group those concepts together for things like reporting or behavioural purposes. Let me illustrate. So what we've got here is the idea that this particular revenue account, we're storing properties on it that tell us where that account would appear in various reporting packs. So rather than what a lot of systems will get you to do is say that, you know, if I want to work out the revenue for my customer, I'm 100% reliant on picking out a range of accounts. What you can do is, instead of picking out a numbered range, pick out all the accounts that basically have a property on them that says they go into the revenue. And that nicely decouples the structure of the chart of accounts from the reporting. Obviously, in a clean installation, they'll match very well, but over time they tend to drift. And it may well be that if you've got something like a joint venture partner that has a particular reporting requirement, you want to be able to report in their structure, so you can add an attribute to the account that talks about where that account would add up into their report. And then if they change their mind, it's very easy to just change the property on the account. And really, flexibility there is the key. Now, so that's custom properties on the individual accounts. Oh, and worth noting as well, for things like debtor and creditor accounts, those attributes might be, you know, who's responsible for the account, who chases the debt on the account, that sort of thing. We also have the concept of these custom properties on transactions. And those custom properties on transactions are really the cornerstone to the reporting. So what we're saying is that in addition to the basic nominal ledger account, the basic ledger account to which we post something, which is going to be something like an oil sales account in this case, we're going to store, when we post to that account, we're going to store all sorts of ancillary information that gives us dimensions by which we might report our transactions. So for example, in this example, and it really is only one example, and you know, pretty much no two organisations are the same, and no two organisations will have the same structure. We've got the idea of a legal entity on here. So we're actually, in fact, modelling multiple legal entities inside a single data set, and that's to make things like intercompany easy, consolidated reporting easy, and data management easy. We're also storing more sort of direct industry-related information like concessions, AFEs, well numbers in here. We're also going to store a property on a transaction that tells us whether it's recoverable under the joint venture agreement, and you'll see that in operation. And we're also storing information about life cycles and tax. So you can see there's lots of extra information we can store on these transactions. And also worth noting, because obviously we're talking the property of the account here, what we're not doing is giving the values, because clearly we're going to put those on the transactions when we post them. But what we are doing is we're specifying what information is required when posting to this account. So the nice thing here is that what we can do is in what I would call the sort of the top level P&L accounts, things like the revenue, the direct costs. We can very heavily attribute our data because we want lots and lots of information about where revenue is coming from, where costs is going to. But as you come down the P&L and into the balance sheet, you can reduce the amount of analysis you're asking people to input, because for something like an accruals account, maybe it's not necessary to analyse in that detail. So that's quite powerful to get that really fine-grained choice. But, and it can be an important but, you've still got the idea, even across things like sales and purchase ledgers, of holding these attributes. So if, for example, you want to take the outstanding debt the outstanding debt and analyse that based on the AFE to which the income was generated, that's all fine. That's just extra properties, and we can store it throughout the ledger. And that's really the nub of the power. So that's important. So enough of structure. Let's see something in operation and try and illustrate it for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop a transaction in longhand. I will say up front that not many people actually type many journals in these days. They're mostly imported from spreadsheets or brought in from feeder systems, or generated as a result of posting something like a purchase order, purchase invoice through a procurement system. But let's do one, if you like, in the old-fashioned way. Now, the first question I was asked there is actually the transaction type. And transaction type is an important concept for some systems in two ways. First off, it's worth noting that it's an entirely customizable list. So we can create as many transaction types for an organization as are needed to model their business. And we use it as a reporting property. So it may well be that you want to be able to pull transactions of a particular type out or segment the revenue by type of transaction. I mean, a good example, we'll talk more about cutback, is when you do the cutback transactions, it may well be that you want to show your books gross or net. And by using a particular transaction type for the cutback, you can then very, very quickly include or exclude those cutback transactions and get a gross or net figure out of the same system. So let's give it a reference number. The system's assigned, a little bit of scrolling, I'm afraid my screen resolution is a bit awful. The system's assigned an accounting period, which is our current period. And Sun Systems is very, very flexible about period handling. So there's lots and lots of opportunity for organisations to deal with period. And the system, Sun Systems is very light. In fact, it pretty much has no period or year-end routines you have to deal with. It's all just about the soft processes to get the numbers right. I'm going to give it an account code. In this case, it's a supplier code. But you notice that part of that was filled in. And the reason part of that was filled in was because the other reason I'm using my transaction type is to automate and validate. So I've basically got rules behind the scenes that tell the system what a transaction of this type would look like. So if it was a prepayment transaction, it might have rules about forward posting into the periods I'm going to affect with the prepayment. Or if it was something like a cash receipt, it might be specifying that one side will be to the bank account. All that sort of thing can be enshrined in the transaction types. I filled that in, and the system could now, in fact mine's quite open, but could now blank off any analysis I didn't want to hold on this side. Obviously in my case I'm actually holding most of it. Another area of interest in this sector is currency. Sun Systems has very flexible currency handling. I've got my set up in what I would call a sort of mid-size configuration, in that what I've got configured is I've got a transaction currency, so that's going to be the natural sort of currency of the transaction itself. I've got an operating currency, in this case GBP, but I'm also storing a reporting currency, in this case US dollars. The implication being that what I'm going to be doing is reporting to either a US partner or a US parent. And now, because I've got US dollars on everything, I can report instantly without having to do some sort of restatement as part of the reporting process. And although I've got 3 set up here, we can in fact go out to 5, and there is configurable choices about how they're calculated and the nature of them. So if I wanted to have, one transaction currency and 5 fixed currencies representing, my local operating currency, my regional currency, my business partner's currency, and my group currency, that's possible. Likewise, I could store 3 variables, 2 fixed. Lots of choices, and generally more than enough for most organisations. I'm going to post this one in euro. The system is allowing me to put in a spot rate. Again, that's a security option, whether you want spot rates, but the system obviously behind the scenes has period and day rates, and also has a fully flexible revaluation routine that allows you to revalue the sections of the ledger based on, even down to revaluing perhaps particular Wells transactions or a particular AFE's transactions or a particular supplier's transactions in very fine detail with configurability about where the postings go. I'm going to give this an amount in euro, and I'm then going to pick my analysis. So as I say, in this example, we've modelled multiple legal entities inside a single data set, and that's very possible to do, but the system will still maintain a fully balanced balance sheet for each of them, so I lose no detail and no control by doing this. I'm actually going to, just to illustrate another point, I'm going to skip a lot of the fields that I've got available for entry here, because what I've got is another level of automation that's going to use the information I do fill in to basically complete the rest for me. Now, obviously, in a more honed system, we would actually either hide those fields or not put them on the form or whatever. We wouldn't expose them, but I actually want you to see the additional information that's coming back. So I've given it an AFE, which will be my primary driver of information. I've got the choice here of marking this cost as either being recoverable or not recoverable within the scope of the JV agreement. In this case, I'm going to mark it as recoverable. I'll skip life cycle, skip supplier. VAT, The system has basically a flexible tax engine. You'll see the tax engine doing some work in a moment, but it can be configured to deal with any international tax regime and deal with the complexities of overseas or mixed national tax reporting requirements. So let's stick in some more curves. Oop. Told you my typing was going to be a pain. And let's scroll down a bit and we'll hit new line. So again, what the system's done based on my automation logic and my tax calculations, everything, it's looked up my currency rate, it's completed my tax calculation, it's actually done that gross to net calculation of the tax for me, filled that number in, it's worked out from the tax rate I used where the input and output tax accounts are, and it's posted the cost for me. And that's it, pretty much done. So having done that, I'm going to hit post, and that's going to go away into the system. Now, as an optional extension, what I could have done is set up rules that say, based on certain criteria of that journal, don't allow me to enter it straight away, but basically hold it and then get somebody else to approve it. So there's the ability to add in authorizations into the process as well. But that's just designed to give you a very quick flavor of, if you like, some of that structure and operation, that idea that when I post a journal line to an account, the account is going to control what analysis I collect on it and what additional information I store. So I don't propose, given the time we have available, to go through all of this, but key processes to be aware of here, things like the corporate allocations run. And corporate allocations is the process that can do things like cost allocations and the cutback calculations. So as I mentioned in brief before, what we can do is basically define where we're going to pull transactions from in a transaction set, the basis on which we're going to chop them up, and then the target for those. So for something like a JV, it will be a whole range of cost accounts. The basis for recharge will be based on the partner shares in the JV, and then the target for it will be basically taking all those detailed cost information and chopping, say, 40% of those out and putting them into a recoverable account in detail, so that we can then hand over that detailed report to our partner to claim the money. Similarly, it can do more simple things like, as I say, collect all your energy costs centrally and then split them out over department by head, or collect all the costs that you incur in a particular business that are on behalf of another part of the business and do intercompany recharging based on the relationship between the two and make the postings over in the target data set. So there's lots and lots of stuff that can be done with corporate allocations, and it's a very, very flexible tool. Obviously, we've got things in here like fixed assets and depreciation methods and stuff, and what you'd expect in terms of automated payments of suppliers and things. The other one, which I will mention, is, let's say, ledger revaluation. So some systems have very, very strong revaluation rules. You can define an unlimited number of revaluation profiles, where each revaluation profile can basically be defined to revalue a subset of your organization's transaction set. And that can be based on accounts, it can be based on any of those custom analysis properties we defined, and it can then calculate the revaluation transactions for you in terms of unrealized gains and losses. And then obviously the system understands how to, when doing things like matching cash or running payment runs, how to deal with creating a realized gain or loss as part of that process. So that's it on the sort of, if you like, the transaction entry point of view. And what I want to focus now on for a while is reporting, because reporting is kind of where it all comes together. So what we have in what I would call our mid-tier reporting product, we have obviously the sort of operational listing reports and documents produced by the accounting system itself. In the middle tier, we have a product called Query and Analysis. And the Query Analysis product, in fact, sits over the ledgers, and it sits over the EAM product that Lee showed you earlier as well. So you've got a single way of querying the whole system. And the idea is that this is designed very much to be an end-user reporting tool. Again, we don't really have time on this call, but when I see people, I generally try to sort of make sure that when we demo the software live to people, that I make sure I leave the room giving them that warm feeling that they can actually write these reports themselves. But let's look at one in use. What I've done here is, and the product comes in two halves. There's effectively a standalone reporting tool, which is where we are now, that focuses very much on interactive reporting, the ability to drill into numbers, expand numbers, see more detail behind them. And then the other half, which we'll also look at briefly, is to plug into Microsoft Excel. And that's basically, its power is generated by the fact that Excel is, pretty much the tool of choice for most people for sort of onward data manipulation. But let's start with the standalone product. So what we're looking at here is a sample, and it really is only a sample set of reports for an oil and gas company. I would say one of our standard tricks is that we will often try and work with existing report formats. We don't try and ram a standard report pack down people's throats either. So if we look at this single report page here, this is focused on project costs, and you'll see we've got a sort of a P&L summary report in a little bit more detail there, and we've got some JV information further down. But if we start with the project costs, what we're looking at here is a set of information that relates to the organisation as a whole. But it becomes very quick simply by right-clicking on this to break this information into more detail, and there's a variety of ways we can do it. So in this case, I'm going to break this out by AFE. And when I click breakout, what it's going to do is it's going to go through that report, and now instead of a high-level organisation level project costs, it's basically going to give me project costs by AFE. So I've now got a much more detailed report. But similarly, I could start at the top, and rather than explode out in detail, I could drill down and look at the detail behind that number, which will start to zoom me into an individual number. So if we go back up to the project costs, if I do that drill down by, let's do it by account. You'll also notice, incidentally, that although previously I used, if you like, drills I'd done before, it's very, very easy to just add in another level of drill. So you can now see the account level detail behind that. And similarly from here, if I want to, I can go down to the individual transactions behind that number. Oop. And it becomes very, very easy to go from the very top of the organisation right down into the detail within. Also worth noting that in this case, I've got a gross cost there at summary level, but I've also pre-extracted more detail of it, so I can now see gross costs by AFE and now net costs by AFE. And you can see again that's where I'm using this trick of saying that my cutback transaction is a particular transaction type. So the only difference really between that report there and that report there is the exclusion of one specific transaction type that basically takes it out of the report's filter range. So the idea is to use all these extra reporting attributes that we've added to the transactions as very, very quick and easy ways of getting more detail into our reports and allowing us to cut our reports, slice and dice them, and get from the summary down to the detail. So that's the standalone tool. The other area I wanted to cover off quickly was the Excel plugin. So what we're seeing here is basically the product sits as a plugin within Microsoft Excel. So what I'm seeing is an extra ribbon of functionality, in my case, Excel 2010. And what it enables me to do is design a report inside Microsoft Excel. So it's in many places it's an absolutely standard Excel workbook. I've got the concept of some typed cells. I've got, with text in, I've got some cells with some standard Excel formulae in. But what I've also got is these cells, and these cells, like the cells we were looking at in the standalone report writer, are actually hooked directly to the numbers in the accounting system. In this case, they're hooked via some criteria cells I've added to the report to allow me to filter. But this top panel here is actually just the filter on my accounting data. It's telling me actual transactions, because it could be actual transactions or budget transactions or commitment transactions as fed through by feeder systems or journaled in by hand. it's telling me which account codes I'm going to pick up. It's telling me what period I'm interested in. And in this case, I've added a filter on a particular cost center as well. And over here, we're just saying some of the base amounts is what I want to get into my workbook. So you can see that conceptually this is now very simple because it's just lots of cells, each of which are hooked up to some numbers in the accounting system. And if I want to, I can double click that criteria cell, ask it for the London numbers, hit OK, hit recalc, and all of a sudden I'm now going to get this report out from my London cost center with a couple of clicks of a mouse. And that's very powerful because you can give this tool you can even give this tool to, if you like, operational people in the business, and allow them to interrogate the system live to get live accounting information related to them wherever they may be. And the system can do other things as well. I mean, I'm pulling out summaries there. I've also got the ability to pull out things like, in this case, I'm going to actually pull out open transactions across my debtor accounts. I'm going to group it by account, and in essence, populate a spreadsheet with a full debtor report for the organisation. So as you can see, what I've now got is I've now got a spreadsheet that's got an A's debt summary in it, but behind each of those rows, in fact, within the report ledger, I've got the transaction detail. And all of that is driven by that one cell there. So even if I don't want to give people access to the tool set to build these things or recalculate them, if I just remove that cell, I've actually just got an A's debtors report fully constructed in Excel that can be shared with people who have no access to the accounting system. And that is very, very powerful. The other sort of key attribute here is I have the ability to round trip. So although I've been pulling information merely out of Sun Systems, I've also got the ability to use Excel as a data preparation tool. So what I've done here is I've basically built a fairly simple journal in my spreadsheet, and it might represent something like a cash book return, or some manual recharge or accrual journal I want to model in Excel. It might be something that some branch office is going to send in to me that I need to get into the system. And what I've done is I've built a map behind the scenes that links where all the information on here is, things like the accounts, the amounts, the cost center, the date, and I've linked that to my accounting system. So when I hit upload, what this is going to do is it's going to basically reformat my spreadsheet into a journal and attempt to post that journal into my accounting system. Now, it's actually failed. And if we look in cell A1, you can see it's failed for a very specific reason. It doesn't like the account in cell B12. And if I change the account in cell B12 and hit upload, this time it will go. So you can see that ability to round trip, and we can round trip not just transactional data, but that's because I fixed it wrong. I was expecting that to go in. Now if I do it, it'll work. There we go, that's better. 8 records written. So that's a simple example. I've got a more complex one which I won't bother posting, but it will give you a feel. A slightly more complex example, but again a fairly typically used one, is this is again, it's actually relating to oil and gas, but it's got, it's basically the equivalent of a sort of the kind of budget workbook you might give to a cost center manager in the organisation. And what I've got in here is I've basically got costing information down the left, I've got periods across the top, and what it's actually going to do is it's actually going to post the whole thing for me as a journal into our budget. It's going to upload that into our budget. And we can use the same technology to upload it into the budget to then control against procurement. So if I hit upload, that's actually going to send 108 records into the system. But that round tripping is very, very powerful because it enables you to use Excel in some cases as an intermediate processing engine. Now, I would never suggest you store information in Excel. The truth should always be in the system. But the fact that you can pull information out, manipulate it, and push it back gives you real power and real flexibility in dealing with sort of, the complexities of your business. And I think that was all I really wanted to talk about in Sun Systems. That's with some apologies, that's a fairly quick and sharp run through. but my intention really was to just give you a flavour of the system. Oh, there we go, make transactions. I think the intention now is we were going to open up the lines and see whether there are any questions, but I'll hand you back to Steve.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark, and thanks also to Lee. Just to wrap up, from my perspective, hopefully that's been an interesting but brief insight into the sorts of solutions that we can provide. Obviously, we can provide some more information and some more detail to anybody who wants to go into more depth. Also, it's probably worth explaining a little bit about the process that we follow to implement these kinds of solutions, and what the added value is, I suppose, that we can provide in terms of help, assistance and advice to get things implemented and set up as quickly and as efficiently and therefore as cheaply as possible. We've been doing this for many, many years, and one of the things that we've been able to do is to develop some key templates for standard structures and chart of accounts with analysis profiles, standard kind of processes such as a basic multi-entity setup around JVs with some cutback processes, similar to what Mark was showing and describing. So we have a lot of that we've actually pre-packed and can offer that as part of an implementation service, so that we're not absolutely starting from scratch, and you can get something which is very workable, very scalable and very robust. You can get it set up actually quite quickly. So anybody who does want some more information on that, then we'll be very happy to go through that.